Hey, welcome to Authentic Chat. My name's Josh, and I've got some special guests with me tonight. Let's get into it. Alright, so we're here. I've got, of course, Pastor Corey is with us as usual. But I got two special guests with me tonight. I got Pastor Don Stubbs from the Branch Church and Off the Wall Ministries, Discipleship, Off the Wall Discipleship.
Yeah.
And
you got it.
Yeah. and then Sheriff Orvis Campbell. Hey, thanks for being with us, guys. I really appreciate it. And so those of you that are joining us, whatever camera I'm supposed to be looking at, this one is we've been sitting kind of just talking for about 15-20 minutes, and we're just going to continue that discussion, and it's the Authentic Chat. So we're just going to chat. So for those of you that have that are part of our church family, what we try to do is we try to take the message from Sunday, bring it into the other 6 days of the week, and continue that conversation going. So this past week, we're walking through the book of 1 Corinthians, and we were in 1 Corinthians chapter 4, and Paul says that you're not to judge anyone. And he has this whole conversation with them, and we took that and we walked into what it means to be unified, and that the biggest hurdle to unification is judgment. And Paul says, do not judge anyone. Then he goes right into chapter 5. He goes into telling them, hey, you've got some problems in your church, and I'm judging that man who is sleeping with his stepmom. That's an issue. So he says, I'm judging that. So he says, don't judge anyone, and then he starts judging. And he's not contradicting himself.
Yeah.
There's something he's doing there. He's saying you don't judge people. We're not God. We can't send people to hell, and it's not our responsibility to judge people. But he judges the action. And that is where we're going to walk into a conversation with you guys, because our focus is, we believe that the church is the light of the world, and that it is the hope of the world. And that because we have a relationship with Jesus Christ and the Holy Spirit empowering us, that we can walk into unification and create an atmosphere of unification within our community. So I brought this. I'm gonna stop talking in just a second, and I probably won't talk much because I'm gonna let you guys take over.
Good, man.
I'm gonna reference this book. It is The Third Option by Miles McPherson, who was an NFL football player. And he jumps into the conversation of racial equality, and that's how I got to know you guys even further. We've had a relationship. I knew you and kind of just know you, trying to avoid any bad situations.
From that one arrest, right?
just the one. That is, don't get that out there. But through TREC, which is Tuscarawas Racial Equality Collective, we've gathered and we've been having these meetings and working and getting this topic at the front of the church.
Yeah.
In this book, Miles McPherson lays out saying, and I'll just jump to it because the conversation needs to go, is that he says that you can either choose sides or you can choose to honor, but you can't choose both. And so with that, I'll come to you first, Sheriff. Do you want? How do you want me?
Orvis. Sheriff,
Orvis. Okay.
Whatever.
Boss.
Yeah.
Bob. So, Orvis, if you can share with just the conversation we were having earlier, bringing that into this conversation. Go.
Well, honestly, so that that last quote, you can choose sides, or you can choose honor. That is definitely a very fair topic for law enforcement. Law enforcement, firefighting, all those types of professions have always considered themselves a brotherhood. But if you get to a point where you put the brotherhood above honor, you've got a problem now. If your agency gets to the point where somebody's doing something wrong, somebody's abusive to the people they arrest, or somebody was pocketing something from an arrest, and if the culture in your agency is such that you could never betray the brotherhood, that would be the ultimate betrayal over the honor of the profession.
Yeah.
There was a there was a really good movie came out a few years ago called Courageous, and it was about some deputies that tackled just that, and I think that that's absolutely true, and I think that when we look at incidents like we've talked, many times before about the George Floyd incident, I mean, obviously, good law enforcement officers have a real problem with what Officer Chauvin did, having that man, no matter what he had done, face down, kneeling on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, almost like he wasn't human. That's a problem.
Absolutely.
But while that's scary, the real problem is why couldn't the others speak up, or why didn't they? And I don't know what was in their heart that day, why they didn't. I heard a rumor that a couple of them were brand new rookies and maybe they really didn't feel. But that situation was so blatant that I think even someone that new, had you gone through the police academy, even with just that much training, you should have had the courage to speak up. Yeah. Somebody should have, been saying, "Hey, let's get him off. Let's get up, man, get him up here. Let's get him in the car." I was very disappointed out of that incident. A couple of weeks afterwards, or a month or so afterwards, when they released the footage of George Floyd resisting, and like that was some big light bulb coming on. And from my perspective, I had always assumed George Floyd resisted. I had always assumed that there had been some sort of resistance that caused him to get down there, but it really was a moot point. The resistance was over. There was no more fight in him. There was no more resistance in him. And I don't like the idea that a profession would, or even those who back our profession would look and go, "See, he resisted." It's not like they were just picked. It's missing the whole point. The whole point is all of us as humans are imperfect. However, we need to strive to act honorably. And in that situation, we just didn't. There's no defending it, and all the good law enforcement officers, the peace officers that I know, agree with that. And I don't know what's in that officer's heart. We've talked about this at our Trek meetings, that he could be the biggest racist ever, or he might be abusive to everybody he encounters, whether they be white, black, Hispanic, I don't know. But what I do know is actions were not appropriate, and it dishonored our profession, and we will probably take decades to recover from that.
Yeah. And that goes right to the judgment, because you're not judging the officer to hell. You're judging his actions. His actions were wrong. Yeah. No matter what his heart was, no matter what that doesn't matter, because his actions are judged.
And that's a great point. I know you brought it up from the Bible, and in law enforcement that really rings home. I mean, profiling is something that is a hot topic in law enforcement, and it's a complex topic. Profiling works, but not profiling by race. If I stop a driver or a pedestrian because of the color of his skin, I am wrong, and it's ineffective. And all I'm doing is driving a wedge between our law enforcement agency and the community. Yeah. However, if I stop somebody based on their actions to further investigate whether or not there might be some criminal activity, well, that's okay. And the problem is that neither side sometimes wants to understand that. If I saw you walking through a neighborhood and you were of the opposite color and I stopped you for that reason, that's not right. It just simply isn't. But if I come through that neighborhood, it's dark, and I'm in that neighborhood a lot, and I know most of the people there, and I see you and you run and duck behind a tree, well, that gives me something to investigate. I'm profiling the actions as being unusual, and they might suggest that criminal activity is afoot. Yeah. I don't get out of the car and beat you and tase you, but it does allow me to get out and say, "Hey, sir, what are you doing here? You're ducking behind a tree. Come on out here. Let me see what's going on." Yeah. That's good police work. However, it gets mixed in a lot with that stereotyping people and stopping it. And even the guys who teach this worldwide, the guys who teach drug interdiction, the best guys in the world will tell you, and we've had some advanced courses that show it's just wrong. It doesn't work. Not only does it divide the community, it doesn't work. It doesn't produce more stuff. It doesn't produce more drugs and arrests. It just produces more hate. Yeah. That's it.
That's good.
Yeah, and so within that, the Bible tells us, and Paul gets in this in 1 Corinthians, where he says, "Brothers, you got an issue because you're going after other brothers. There's division in the church, and it's been neat to see the relationship that's been built within Trek between pastors, and because there's like we had our meeting this afternoon, and we gathered together, and there was, I believe, 8 different pastors in the room from 8 churches in our community, just coming together to continue this. What do you think? Because Don, you were one of the first person. You were the first person after the George Floyd incident, and everything was beginning to blow up, and I, as an individual who grew up in Tuscarawas County, and has had the experience I had, it's limited, and so I immediately was like, I need a different perspective, and I reached out to you, Don, and you helped, and from that it kind of birthed what has become Trek. Speak to the unity in the church and unity in the community.
Yeah, so by no means am I an expert, but I do believe that unity is a defining characteristic of being a disciple of Jesus Christ, individually and corporately. I love even in Jesus in his high priestly prayer, John 17:23, he said, Father, I in them as you are in me, that they may be brought to complete unity, that the world may know you sent me. So unity is this concept of bringing people together for the purpose of showing them that there's a better way, i.e. Jesus Christ. And I think when we have unity as pastors, we come together and we're not fighting over territory, we're not fighting over people. I don't even understand that, honestly. All this is God's, and we're called to a sacred duty to love one another, encourage one another, to build one another up, to support our police officers. They have a tremendously difficult job. And so the church is supposed to be there rallying people to support them and to encourage them and to get behind them. And then when we see wrong, to handle that in a way that honors both Jesus Christ and our law enforcement and the people who may be being abused. We honor all those people by dealing with this situation, say that's wrong, we're not going to stand for it, but we have legal means by which we're going to take action. And we'll keep doing that until action is taken. So I think unity is that unifier, and it's a cord that holds us all together, so we don't all just try to do our own thing, honestly. Yeah. It's ineffective when we're fighting and the world's fighting. Where are they going to turn? They need to see churches and law enforcement and the community come together, unite behind good causes, just causes, like systemic racism is a real problem. But it can be solved. It can be solved when good people get together and they do the right things for the right reason.
Yeah.
So, and really it's to love people and to love God.
Yeah, and that's where, I think we kind of, the situation with George Floyd, you said it's going to take a decade, maybe longer, for the healing to take place. We see that within the church when a minister falls and the trust that he had and abuses it and uses it to hurt people.
Yes.
It's a long term. I've seen people walk away from God because of a minister falling. And so we have to be able to hold each other accountable in that, in the actions that we're doing. That's what's so important. What Paul's saying is, hey, we're not going to judge you. I'm not going to judge you based upon an external because you have hair and the rest of us don't. I'm not going. That's not my judgment point. My judgment point is going to be on.
I'm judging a little.
We aren't going to hold it against you.
I'm okay with that.
But we don't. We need to hold each other accountable to our actions.
And the other one, the rest of us need to want that. So you talk about people who join the gym and get fit, and they're exponentially more effective when they have a buddy that they don't want to let down.
Accountability.
And accountability is not a bad thing. It's not like you are over me. It's us holding each other accountable just as human beings to be able to say, hey, Don, you said something the other day that kind of bothered me, and I want you to think about it a little bit. And that's a good thing. I mean, we should invite that and not be so offended by the fact that somebody points out somebody else's perspective. And it takes thick skin and it takes, some confidence. And I think that definitely is attainable. You were saying that we could end this. I think that's the key, is people coming together, getting to know each other, and having that confidence to talk about
I think it's. I'm going to bring Corey in for this, because Corey, as a younger pastor, as you know, in your role, how do you see, like, you know, with the men that were the police officers that were there with Chauvin, didn't step in? How do you see? Do you feel like that you have that ability to have that conversation with the men that are above you?
Yeah, I think that's the key. What you just said, Orvis, is the ability to get to know each other, whether you feel like you're on the same side as them or not. And unfortunately, our younger generation is constantly bombarded with pick a side. Pick a side. Are you against this person? And if you don't pick a side, then I'm going to automatically assume, because you're not on my side, you're on that side. And so what it does is unfortunately it silences us to the point where we could become worried or scared to speak up to somebody who is an authority, or to somebody who maybe holds, you know, more seniority than us. But the ticket there is to get to know each other and to be comfortable with one another. And I believe it can be solved, but we all have to be willing to take care of one another. And we have to be willing to not only speak into someone else's life, but to be willing to allow someone to speak into our life. And to be willing to have that thick skin and say, okay, I'm willing to accept that, but then also know that it's mutual. I can also speak up the chain to higher command, or to somebody with more wisdom, more experience, and they see from my perspective. That's the only way we're going to grow. That's the only way we're going to be able to attain this goal of reconciliation and taking care of one another.
And one of the things, I think people hear the word unity and they think that we're in, everyone's on the same page and agreeing with like, if I like this, you have to like it. That's not what unity is.
Yeah.
But unity in this case, when it comes to a wrong, we agree with what God says.
Yeah.
And we unite against that truth. With that truth, and say that's just wrong. Because God says it. This isn't a personal opinion thing at this point.
Right.
I come to the Word and I said, well, all men are created equal. That's not me. I would want to believe, and I do believe, I would think that way, but without God, I may not. And so we see out in the world people who don't agree with the Word, but that should not be the church.
Yeah.
There should be a unity in the church that says, no, the Bible says that's wrong, so it's wrong. We will stand against it in a way that honors our laws and everything, but we're standing against it, because that's when the Bible said be brought to complete unity. It's to God's truth and God's law.
As the moral standard.
Yeah, as a standard. And we don't get to decide that.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, and I just love that.
Yeah. There's a quote from Brad Gray said it this a couple weeks ago. Unity does not mean uniformity.
Yes.
It doesn't mean we all do the exact same thing the
Yes.
exact same way.
Yeah.
Unity means we're going for the same purpose, for the
Yes.
same goal, and
Yes.
that's the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Yes.
And so, and yes, there are situations where it's clear.
Yes.
This is we're all in this together.
Yes.
And I think this is a valuable part of what took place. God says He'll bring all things for good.
Yeah.
For those who purpose after Him. So those are the purpose that we have. Unfortunately, is that we get to see a unified movement of this has to change, and it's cool seeing in this room. And we're running out of time already. So any last thing, like what's like if you could just have each of you have 30 seconds. What would you last words of on this topic of unity in the church and unity in the community?
Well, I'll just go because I like to talk. I think the beliefs that we can prevail. God is faithful.
Mm-hmm.
And His Word will stand this test that it is now facing. The question is, will His people support His Word and then do the action that lets the world know that we're just not speaking this, we're actually living. We will defeat racism in our own hearts through the power of the Holy Spirit and the power of the Word, and by our actions of saying, Holy Spirit, change me so that I see people how you see them. And to believe that,
Yeah.
not Like, I hate that we don't believe that God's going to win this. I know He will. I just wonder if we're going to get on His bandwagon and fight for His truth and His way.
Yeah, it's good.
And from my personal experience, I spent most of my career as an investigator, and I investigated a lot of murders. And if something horrific would happen, and I would envision whoever did it as some sort of a monster. And it helped motivate me to solve the crime. But I was always disappointed because when I met them and I interviewed them, and in most cases they confess, they weren't a monster. They did something monstrous,
Yes.
Yeah.
but they weren't a monster. And I think that it's just as simple. If I heard that Josh, McDonald had some stance on something that was contrary to me, it's very easy to make you my enemy, or that guy is. But sitting on a couch with you and actually talking it out, you usually come away with going, well, that's not what I thought at all.
Yeah.
That's not what I heard.
That's good.
And that's the key to our disappointment with Congress, our disappointment in the world is just getting to know the others, which comes right back to what you said.
Yeah, I guess that leaves us with the challenge and the mission, if you choose to accept it, which is to do just that. Be willing to reach across the aisle
Yes.
and no longer look at them through the perception of you're a monster because you're not on my side,
Yeah.
or we don't agree or see eye to eye. Something as simple as having a different skin complexion can create division in this land, and it's disappointing when in reality that could end up being your best friend.
Yeah.
You could be missing out on seeing things and learning things and growing and helping each other become better people and advancing the mission.
Yeah. Well, we're going to close out. I want to recommend for everybody, if you are a reader, or it's also on Audible. So it's the Third Option by Miles McPherson. Great book on this topic. And man, hey, thanks again, guys, for joining me.
Yes, thank you.
And it's been a great Authentic Chat podcast, number 6. So again, thank you guys. Hey, we're so glad you guys joined us. If you're commenting, we're going to follow up with you. And thank you so much for joining us. And we will see you next time.